What's up guys, it's Mitch here from the DIYRecordingStudio.com, and today we're going to look at a real DIY solution to creating your own massive reverb sounds. Stick around, it's going to be an awesome video, but let's get into it. So recently I was asked to record some drums for a project, and they had some very specific ideas in mind. They specifically asked for something along the lines of When the Levee Breaks with John Bonham on the drums. There's this huge drum sound on that album. They also recommended as a reference track a song called Simple Boy by Carnival, which is an Australian progressive rock band, and in that track they also have this massive drum sound. So I did a bit of digging into how those sounds were achieved on those records, and particularly what I found interesting was the John Bonham When the Levee Breaks album. What they did on that track was, and you may already know this, but what they did famously on this track was John Bonham set his drum kit up in a stairwell, and then they had some microphones placed at the top of the stairwell to capture that drum sound. And funnily enough, that's actually not too different from what would be done in some big studios using chambers. So in big studios like EMI and other huge studios across the world, they often have what they call chambers for creating reverb, and these rooms can vary, but essentially they boil down to the same thing. Either they have a room in which all the spill from the main recording live room spills into, and then there are microphones placed in that room to create a massive reverb sound that way. Or the other solution is to have a specific room where you pump in audio signal via speakers into a new room and then have microphones set up in different arrays to pick up the reverb in those rooms. And there are heaps of classic examples of this. In some of the famous Motown records, they famously set up a chamber reverb by pumping their audio signal into the bathrooms and recording that. And there are a whole bunch of ways that we can achieve these reverb sounds. And the cool thing that if you're doing this in post after recording the session, you can actually have quite a lot of control over that reverb and what goes into the chamber. So I thought I'd have a bit of fun with this one and try a couple of different setups and see how it all went. So first off, I started by recording my drums in my usual drum space, which is quite dry, and I used the Beta 52A on kick drum. I used 57s on top and bottom snare. I also used an additional cheap condenser mic that I used on my snare, and I paired them together with this great little mic clip that I got from Wilkinson Audio. If you're interested in that, I can do another video, so hit me up on the comment sections down below. I also had a 57 on Tom 1, and I put my SM7B on my floor for some beefy low end on that. I used a mono overhead to pick up some of the overall kit sound, and then I went with two condenser mics in the corner of my room to try and pick up a wider stereo image of the drum kit. And I thought I'd use this technique with the room mics to try and get the stereo image of the drums in a bit of a different way, where I could have a bit more control of that sort of stereo field of the drums rather than just an overhead image. Because once I added this chamber reverb, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a mono reverb or a stereo reverb, and I wanted to have a big wide image of the drums. So I thought I'd try this setup where I could have a bit more control over the stereo image of the kit. And lastly, I needed something to mic up the hats, and I wasn't sure if I was even going to use this mic, and I'd used up most of the mics in my kit, and I went for a trusty SM58 on the hi-hats, where I took the grill off to make it a bit brighter. And honestly, I actually usually love using a 57 on my hi-hats a lot, or even the SM7B, but these mics were all being used. So the 58 was kind of just a last minute effort to get that mic'd up. And if I'm ever using a hi-hat mic, I like it to sound kind of trashy anyway, so a cheap dynamic usually gets me there. Once I got that drum mix going, I decided that I would then go for a natural live chamber effect. So what I did was open the door of the studio and place my ribbon microphone out in the stairwell that is kind of near where my studio space is. And I thought that would be an interesting first attempt at getting a natural chamber effect, just using the spill out into another space. Once I was finished tracking, I then went for a more controlled method with my chamber reverbs. I used the reamp functionality of my Apollo Zen Tour to send most of the drum kit out of the reamp and then into a speaker outside the studio that then pumped that sound much louder and more aggressively down through the stairwell And then at the bottom of the stairwell, I tried 2 different mic combinations. I tried just a mono ribbon setup, and then I tried a stereo pair of the M3s, the same ones I used as room mics in the studio. And the idea there was that I would go for a really big mono sound with the ribbon and see how that sounds, and also try a stereo condenser setup to see if adding some more width as a chamber reverb might give better results. And it was really just a bit of trial and error. I've never ever attempted to create a real acoustic reverb before like this, so I tried a few different things to see what would work and just give myself a few options, so when I sent this off to the people I was working with, they could pick and choose what they liked best. But that's enough talking from me. Let's get in and hear some of those audio examples. The first up is the original ribbon in the stairwell while I was performing the drums live. Let's give that a listen. So that was an interesting one. I think personally that it sounds okay. It's got a lot of live energy to it. There's also a lot of cymbal energy spilling out of the room and then getting into the hallway. And I think that it might kind of muddy up the reverb. And the problem with this is that you can't attenuate any of those high frequencies without losing the reverb. But there might be some interesting things I could do with this with compression and other effects. The next up is the more controlled method, where I use the speaker in the stairwell and then the ribbon down in the bottom of the stairwell to pick up a much bigger, beefier sound. Let's have a listen to that. And I think this sounds pretty good. For a mono reverb, it really fills out the space. There's a lot of kick and snare energy, and that ribbon really brings out the fatness and the low end energy in the room. I really love that ribbon microphone. I think there's a lot that could be done with this mono reverb, especially once you add compression to sort of bring out some trashiness and some of the energy that's in the room. And lastly, let's listen to the Rode M3s, which were in an XY pair in the same position as the ribbon microphone. And remember, I did this to try and get a more stereo chamber reverb. So let's have a listen to that. What I found interesting about this one is, yes, there is a bit more stereo image of this sort of reverb going on, especially in the mid-range and higher end frequencies. You really start to hear some width on the snare hits and some of the cymbal sounds, but that kick energy still sounds a bit more in the center. And I think this is the sound that I'll probably go with. I love how that stereo reverb is really adding to the drum sound and its width in the mix. And I think overall, once again, with some compression and some other processing, this could really be the sound that I'm going for on this drum performance. And for some cheap mics, those M3s really kind of pull out the reverb sound that I was looking for. What I would love to have been able to do is have a second ribbon microphone that I could use in a stereo pair. I think it would sound incredible using that ribbon sound in a stereo bloomline formation, and it might be something I'm able to do. If you keep an eye on this channel, I'm actually going to be getting my second ribbon microphone very, very soon from Bumblebee Pro, so stay tuned for that one. But let me know what you guys think. I think that the stereo reverb is probably what I'll go for, but maybe you guys have a different idea. Hit me up in those comment sections down below and let me know if there's anything you guys want to see me try out, be it DIY solutions to effects that we can use in the studio, or mic techniques, acoustic solutions, or any other kind of setups for DIY home studio effects. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I'm Mitch from the DIYrecordingstudio.com, and I'll catch you soon.